This podcast is powered by the pros at Paschal Air Plumbing and Electric. Arkansas owned, Arkansas operated. GoPaschal.com.
All right, Mr. Murphy, we'll start with the coaches poll that came out yesterday. Arkansas will have to face, at least preseason, 7 of the top 25 teams within that said coaches poll. When you saw it come out, when you put eyes on it for the first time, what stood out to you?
Good morning, guys. Always a pleasure. The preseason magazines, there was some similarity, and I think Arkansas faced 7 of the top 25 teams in several of the magazine polls we've seen come out. In truth, it's 7 of the top 20 in the coaches poll, because I think Tennessee or A&M is number 20. So, it's no different than most other years. I mean, Alabama's not on there, but Texas is. In fact, Texas is ranked 1 spot higher than Alabama. So the trade-off for Arkansas is you face a team that's just as highly regarded as Bama. The good thing for the Razorbacks, so many of these games are at home. They played so many tight games last year that if they can find a way and beat Tennessee at home early on, or win one of those games against Auburn on the road or A&M in Arlington, then you yourself could warrant attention by the voters in the various polls. So, it's just par for the course, right, for the SEC, and the Razorbacks are used to this kind of thing.
I wonder when I saw A&M at number 20, as they've got a new coach in Mike Elko. I know that I think it's Wegman or Wyman, however you say his name. There's some excitement about what he could blossom into, but that seemed a little high to you, Tom?
Well, here's the thing. When you get past about, 10 or 12, and some of those teams in the top 15, they're not going to do it. I mean, they're going to struggle. It's just a fact. And then some teams ranked outside the top 15 could rocket up it. So the A&M has recruited very well. I mean, there's a bunch of 5-stars on that roster. And so if they put things together, sure, they could live up to 20. But I do think it's a little bit premature maybe to just say that, Mike Elko will succeed immediately. They got a great quarterback in Wegman, and and everything is going to fall into place, because it has only once in the last several years, and that was in the COVID year of 2020 when they went 9-1 and came up 5th. So I don't know. It remains to be seen. Somebody's got to be there.
Tom Murphy with us, brought to you by the Arkansas Beef Council. Let's circle back to Arkansas. They're in camp. They'll be putting the pads on this week. Yesterday we heard from secondary coach Deron Wilson and some of his players. What were your takeaways here from, what is this now, day 4 of camp yesterday?
Yeah, I think 4 or 5. I can't remember what day that was. But, that they feel good about some of their depth, and the fact that they have some veteran guys. They should be able to, their schemes should be, more multiple. They should be able to adjust on the fly a little bit better. They can go 4 deep, maybe even 5, depending on how fast Spellman Bridges can get into playing shape. But, the comparison is for Bridges, a long 6'4" kid. I did a hog future on him. Is Jalen Braxton. And, he's taller and longer than Jalen Braxton, but Braxton played a little bit early last year, and then by midseason he was rocking along pretty good. And as I delineated in my story, they improved 99 spots in pass yards allowed, from last in the country, 131, to number 32. And so that was just part and parcel of a much improved defensive effort that kind of got overlooked because Arkansas didn't have a great season.
Jaheim Singletary, Tom, is a guy that came in highly heralded, 5-star out of high school, comes over from Georgia. He would probably even consider just an okay season for his standards, something that Coach Wilson mentioned several times yesterday. He's got a full offseason now under his belt. What are you expecting from him in year 2 in Fayetteville?
Well, I think the pressure's not on him as much as it was last year, because I feel like he might have thought that they really needed him to be a dude. And he did start 3 of the first 4 games. But the play, the Brian Thomas catch against LSU, look, he's got fluid hips and he's fast and he's a 5-star. So all that should add up to he can be a player, and he should be a player. But the LSU game, they just kind of exploited him. I think a touchdown in the first half, maybe a touchdown in the second, and he didn't play as much the rest of the year. Now he's more comfortable with his scheme. He should be able to turn and run and let his speed show up on the field more than it did last year. But for right now, Braxton and Keon Stewart are the ones, and so Singletary can come in and not show that there's a letdown and potentially make a bid for a starting job. And then, Marquise Robinson, who's been out a little bit, I think he's going to wind up playing. So that was my biggest takeaway was Darren Wilson and the players felt like there's a lot of interchangeable parts and more depth when you talk about corner and at nickelback.
Now Robinson, if I remember correctly, is the Florida. No, Mitchell's Mitchell's the Florida kid. Marquise is the South Alabama, as you mentioned. Maybe you could just kind of detail for our audience who's unfamiliar with some of the newer guys what they've added in the secondary, Tom.
Yeah, well, I mean, those two guys, and so Mitchell, I think he got a lot of work with the twos in spring, but he's been more with the threes. So I think there's been a message sent to Miguel Mitchell, and I don't know what it was in particular. We can ask Marcus Woodson about that because he's more of a safety, and I'm sure Darren Wilson could have answered it, but, is it some kind of physicality thing? Is it some kind of off-the-field situation, like showing up late to a meeting? You never really know sometimes. But you think you could get some work out of Miguel Mitchell. And then, Robinson, he had a little bit of an injury in the spring, and now he's sidelined for a while here in camp. So he's got some kind of making up to do to get in the rotation at corner. And, there's some others. I think it's going to be really interesting to see what happens with Larry Worth, who the first couple of days it was a little rough in coverage and stuff. He's been a linebacker. They had him at nickel. But the last day or two, Worth has really showed up. His physicality, his coverage, he just got more natural looking in coverage stuff. And then a real question mark. Anthony Switzer is going to play, and it's just a matter of where. He had a great pass rush drill yesterday, getting by running backs and tight ends to the point, to the backfield. And then Jaquindon Jackson did hold him up once. But other than that, Switzer, they call him the Swiss Army knife, plays into his last name. I think he's going to be a quality addition for this defense.
Kind of like the offensive line. It looks to me just, looking over the depth chart coming out of spring, you're going to have to do the same thing in secondary. Guys that can play corner either side, guys that can flip-flop between corner and safety, and then you mentioned the utility position of nickel. With a lack of, I think, definite frontline first-team guys, you're going to have some guys, I think, with injuries along the way and other situations that you can move around.
That is absolutely the case. They've been through it the last couple of years, needing to move folks around. I mean, think about what Hudson Clark's been through. The hog position is going to be very interesting in the way they deploy that because they can have heavier guys like Worth. They can have and Switzer, and they can have lighter guys like the Nico Slaughter, the Tennessee transfer, who I didn't mention a second ago, who's really running with the first team. So, they like their depth. I mean, there's not a ton of 5 stars in that. Jaheim Singletary is, Braxton a 4-star. But if you're playing together, if you know the scheme, you're playing fast, you can make up for maybe what is not 5-star talent with togetherness.
Well, if I've counted it right, not counting Larry Worth, who I guess you should throw in there from what you're saying, you got 13 guys between your 2 corner spots, your nickel, and your safety spots. So Worth would make 14, and 14 guys to back up 5 starting spots if you count the nickel as a starter.
That's a lot, and they like the freshman Tevis Metcalf as a freshman nickel. So, when you look at it, on the whole, if these kids all pan out, there could be some depth to the secondary. And, I do have to check myself every now and again to say, oh, wow, everything's looking rosy in camp. And then, and then you get into week 2 at Oklahoma State, and how does that look on the field? So,
yeah. Well, let's get pads on and have a scrimmage or two, and then we'll formulate some opinion.
Absolutely right. But taken on the whole, if their O-line is improved, if the offensive schemes work better under Petrino, than they did last year, if you stay on the field longer, if there's defensive depth and they're on the same page, who's not to say that Arkansas can win more of those close games and, be more of a factor, bounce back this year, basically.
Tom, one more question for me. I don't know if Tommy has anything else, but the White Sox, they lose their 21st consecutive game. Ties the AL record. They're trying to get to 23, it looks like. You're a guy that likes baseball and follows the MLB with being a Braves fan. What are your thoughts on them in disarray right now up in Chicago?
Yeah, I feel for them. You don't want to see a franchise go through that unless it's like the Phillies or Mets or something like that, or the Nationals, and then you're okay with it. But, they've got some Razorbacks on there. I know Fletcher's been hurt, and Benintendi's not having his greatest year, but I do feel for them. And hey, look, they have this going for them. They beat the Braves in a 2 of 3 game series, in which the third game was postponed for a couple of months, and they won it 1-0 against Chris Sale because we could not score.
Still got that, still harboring a little ill will, it sounds like, in that game. Yeah, I forget about that. Fletcher was traded to them a while back, so that's we always talk about Andrew Benintendi, but that's another guy we failed to mention. Tom, I said last thing for me. I got one more. The Michigan story. We got about a minute with you. We had another Murphy on with us, Dan Murphy earlier, who's wrote the story about Michigan and what's going on with their investigation. Maybe the treetop version of what you read. What do you think should happen with the Wolverines this year for years to come with that football program and what the NCAA has come up with their findings?
Well, I've read about it, but not in depth enough to tell you, well, this should be the penalty, because we've entered such a new realm. And they've already paid a bit of a penalty. But here's the thing. It's the classic conundrum. Would you want your school to win a national championship and then be subjected to this kind of stuff? So many fan bases would say yes.
Yes.
And Michigan said yes last year, and they won it. And so whatever happens from here, they still won last year's national championship. And if it ever comes with an asterisk, well, it just does. They won it.
BetOnline is your #1 source for all your betting needs. Get the latest odds, lines, and matchup reports for baseball, boxing, golf, and more. BetOnline continues to be the fastest and easiest way to place your wagers, including live betting and your favorite casino and card games available to play right from your phone. Head to the website or use your mobile device to sign up today and get in on the action. Remember to use our promo code BELIEVE, that's BLEAV, for your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. Bet online, where the game starts.